We're speaking to Heidy Quah this morning. She's the director and founder of Refuge for Refugees. And she's also one of the winner of Women of the Future Southeast Asia 2020 Community Spirit and Public Service Award. Welcome, Heidy, to the LITE Breakfast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here.
It's so cool to actually have you here because the last time we actually saw you was in a newspaper article and you were hanging out with the Queen.
It is so cool to be here. I mean, I listen to LITE FM all the time.
Really?
So it's just really nice to be on the show.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations for the award. I mean, 8 years after you founded Refuge for Refugees, how do you feel winning such a meaningful award?
It is extremely surreal. I mean, I did not expect to win. And it's been so many years of hard work and so many years of people telling us that, like, hey, focus on serving the other communities instead. Especially with the rise of like xenophobic and hate comment targeted towards the communities these days, the work gets extremely difficult. So this has been a really, really meaningful mark to have won the award.
Now, I guess a lot of time, especially when we are young Malaysians, right? Like you started Refuge for Refugees when you were only 18. We're sort of ignorant at the time of what's happening around us. But what made you notice the refugees and made you sort of aware of their plight?
Yeah, so I think it all started when I was in high school, my last year as a 17-year-old, right? My closest circle of friends were public speakers and school debaters, and we all represented the school in one way or another. And every day after school, we gathered around the school canteen and just talk about what NGOs are not doing enough, what people are not doing enough. And then suddenly it dawned on me, it's one of those days when you like drinking syrup bandung ice and eating nasi lemak. And then I mean, here I am sitting down so angry with the people around me, but what am I doing, right? What am I doing? And it started getting me to ask myself, what is privilege? So I guess in understanding my privilege, I always thought that privilege means big fancy houses and big cars, luxurious holidays. But privilege really just means access to basic education. Being able to walk out my house without feeling targeted. That is privilege. And in understanding my privilege and understanding that I have a voice, what am I going to do about it? I guess that's what drives me to do what I do today.
Yeah, but I mean, what was the trigger? Was it something you saw in the news or was it your parents? What was it that got you really wanting to do this?
It was actually volunteering at a refugee school, and that the trigger for me was, so I started volunteering in a refugee school. 4 months in, I went into the office and go like, hey, I'm going to start college. I have to focus on my studies. I'm done teaching. And headmaster just went like, oh, it's okay, Heidy. Just letting you know as well that school be closed due to lack of funds. And then it dawned on me, I was about to pursue higher education, but these kids were being robbed of their only access to education. How is that even possible, right? I mean, just growing up in PJ as a city kid, I'm really ashamed to say this to a certain extent, but I always grew up knowing that I would get to go to college one day. It was always given, right? It doesn't matter which college, but I know that that's in the books. But these kids didn't have access to basic education. And what was I going to do about it, I guess? So that started the whole ball of just trying to, I guess, fight for access for education for these kids.
Right.
And you set up an NGO at 18 just to help these refugee children.
Yes.
At first.
Yes.
Why do you choose to help the children, especially in terms of education?
I think it was realizing that no one else was fighting for them. We went around, we were talking about, the plight of refugees, and people always then pointed us to children's homes instead, Every time we spoke to companies about it, they go like, I'm sorry, we can't support the work that you do because our resources is meant to be channeled to the local urban poor instead. And I guess that's really what got me, frustrated with the system and really just thinking like, hey, if there's no one that's going to be fighting for them, like I need to do something about it.
But you also have to understand their position as well, right? They are like they have other things. The urban poor, the local urban poor also needs help as well.
100%, for sure, right? And so we each do our part. we all do our part. So I totally understand that, different people have different focuses, just like how I can't expect everyone to be working or supporting the refugee community. But what can I do, right? If my passion and interest lies there, that's where I can build an NGO, right? And gather volunteers and gather people to buy into the vision.
At 18 years old, what were we thinking of?
I know.
Starting an NGO is probably not on our list.
Yeah, and passion, your passion to help others, right? And to set up an NGO. But why the refugees? Maybe, I think a lot of Malaysians especially, I was just recently schooled on the plight of refugees, maybe about 2 years ago. And I think a lot of people in Malaysia do not understand how difficult it is to be a refugee here in Malaysia. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about the plight of the refugees here in Malaysia.
Yeah. So refugees are people who have had to flee their countries due to persecution and war. A lot of times when they come over to Malaysia, it's really the absolute last resort. If they don't flee, they die. So they flee usually with only the clothes on your backs, having to gather your families, jump onto the boat, and not even knowing whether they reach the shores of Malaysia or the shores of anywhere you're heading towards. When you're in the country, because Malaysia is not a signatory of the Refugee Convention Protocol, refugees in Malaysia don't have access to education, to job opportunities. They don't have access to healthcare, just basic human rights. A lot of times, Malaysia works as a stopover before they get resettled to another country like the US, Australia, New Zealand. And this stopover isn't just a 6-month stopover or 2-year stopover. It takes anywhere, from at least 5 years or more. Sometimes they stay over for 10 years. And imagine, kids stop being able to go to school imagine a 5 or 10 year gap. I mean, I always think, I know that when I go on a college break, when I used to be studying, right, when I go to college break, it's just a month, I come back just visibly slower. I mean, it's just frustrating, right? I'm just not as sharp and just not on it, right? But these kids expected to go without education for 5 to 10 years. And how are they supposed to fend for their families? How are the families supposed to survive, I guess? So being a refugee in Malaysia, people usually think oh, you should be lucky, you're safe now. But it isn't. They still live in a lot of fear of people, fear of authorities, and they still really struggle to put food on your table for their families. I mean, just across, just during the MCO, our organization was really actively involved in going down on the ground. In fact, we still are. We've been feeding about 1,000 families on a weekly basis. And it's crazy because, when we think about feeding 1,000 families, how do we even gather these numbers, right? But these numbers, it goes out like crazy. And within two days of opening our forms, it gets filled up. And these families are just people who have not eaten in 3 to 4 days.
What is their ultimate goal for these refugees? To be resettled in another country? Or to return back to their own countries?
So the ultimate goal is to be resettled. Obviously, they would want to be they would want to go home to their home countries. It's just that it's incredibly unsafe at the moment. So the goal is to be resettled, just for a bit of peace of mind, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do they ever want to be, I don't know, Malaysian citizens? Do they ever hope for that?
No,
right?
Not at all. I mean, it is hard. It is so hard to be. They face so much persecution in different ways here in Malaysia that they don't ever hope to be Malaysian citizens. So some of them I know, seeing that doors are closed to be resettled anytime soon, have also then decided to hey, let me try going home instead. So they do want to go home, I guess. I mean, home will always be home, no matter what happens there. But I guess it's just calculating risk and really, asking yourself, is it worth it to go home at this point of time?
But why does it take so long for them to get resettled in another country? So we're like a stopover, you said. Why are we just a stopover? Why can't we make these people part of our community as well?
Yeah, because we are not a signatory of the Refugee Convention Protocol, and that's what we fight for, right? To make them part of our community. But because of different regulations by the government, it's hard. I mean, in so many ways, right? I often tell people that they are already so ingrained in our communities. They work in our factories and our hawker stalls. Yeah, security guards, our janitors. They are actually everywhere. We just need to kind of open up our eyes and have a conversation with them. So are refugees, but the difference is that refugees are people who had to flee due to persecution and war, and it's absolutely it's like if I don't leave the country, I won't make it.
Yeah, but do they like, how do you, like, rights wise, what do they have the right to? Do they, because I think at one point we spoke to someone else and they said that there's a card that they hold.
Yes.
What does that get them?
So when you come to Malaysia as a refugee, you register with UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissions for Refugees, and if it's a successful appointment, often takes a really long time. Actually, you have to go for rounds and rounds and interviews. You have to basically declare that, like, you are a refugee, and declaring that you're a refugee means you cannot go back to your home country ever again. This means that you have to kind of give up everything that you've identified with in the past. And become a refugee, right? But that card, that it barely, I mean, to a certain extent, it, when you meet good people, it serves a bit of a protection on the ground. But a lot of times these cards don't bring you anywhere. It probably just puts you at a chance of resettlement eventually. I guess that's the only.
But it doesn't help them
difference.
get jobs properly or whatever. No.
They're not even allowed to get jobs.
Yeah, they're not even allowed to get jobs
legally.
Right.
Yeah. And so for employers that are looking to hire refugees, I mean, of course, there are those that are extremely kind, but there are a lot of people who hire refugees and migrants only because there's no governing law protecting refugees and migrants. This means that if they exploit the person, if they underpay there's no report that can be made because technically they shouldn't be working in the first place, right?
Yeah. But are they provided with housing or
No.
any kind of
No.
assistance?
No, not at all. No housing, no assistance.
So they're just here
Yep.
with a card.
Yep.
They cannot work. Their kids
Yep.
cannot go to school.
Yep.
They're supposed to look for their own place to stay.
Yep.
And then do what?
They are expected to survive and wait until they get resettled. So it's crazy. I mean, it's mind-boggling because it's exactly that, right? That's why we have a lot of the refugee communities and the migrant communities. They stay in a flat with 30 other people. I mean, it's heartbreaking. My kids message me at 3-4 a.m. in the morning, and my kids are my students, right? And me being the teacher goes like, why are you not asleep? And that's when they tell me, teacher, my house is so crowded, there's not enough space to sleep. So we take turns to sleep in shifts just so that there's enough space to lie down on the ground to sleep. And and that's exactly it, right? They're expected to survive. They're expected to be okay until they get resettled. And this often takes 5 to 10 years or even more.
Wow. Now tell us about one of the most heart-wrenching stories of a refugee here in Malaysia.
Yeah. I think there was this case I was dealing with last year where I remember visiting the family home, and this mom has been struggling for the longest time, struggling with her 3 young kids. And I think she was at the point of just extreme frustration, right? She couldn't feed her kids. She couldn't support the family. The family was really struggling and hugely in debt. And we would often visit to try to see how we could support the kids go to our school. And right as we were ending the visit and I was walking away, she actually jumped to her death. So like as I turned around, like she already had climbed onto the cliff and jumped, with her 3 kids watching her.
Oh no.
Simply because she was just at the end of herself. She was working in a place that wouldn't pay her proper rates.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just listening to your stories just brings tears to my eyes. How do you deal with all this on a daily basis?
I think it's I don't know, it's understanding our why, I guess. Understanding that, like, I don't know, it's actually, I get really jaded by the system, but I think what really helped is spending time with like-minded people and going like, okay, if I'm so angry with the system, what can I do about it, right? How can I continue amplifying and dignifying the voices of the communities? But I think, I mean, it is, I think I'm really thankful that I also have the opportunity to see mental health professionals to unpack everything that we witness, because it can get to you,
Yeah.
it can break you, and it throws me off on so many days, right? I get so angry and so jaded by how things work out. But having a support, you know, not being afraid to reach out to ask for help is so key and so important. It's something that I really love to encourage people to do a bit more.
So that's how you pull yourself back up so that you can do more for these people
Yeah.
who need your help.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
You can't find food.
Yeah.
Their life is practically on the line. Their babies are taken away from them,
Yeah.
and so, and you're focusing on education.
Yeah.
A big part of it is education. You, how can you focus so much on education? Because I understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because through education you have a lot of opportunities, but there's so many other problems
Yeah.
that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
How do you separate your day?
Yeah. So, because the organization has been around for the past 8-9 years, my involvement started a lot with running schools and teaching in schools. But now our schools are pretty much self-sustaining, and our
Okay.
headmaster has kind of like gotten the hang of it, you know. So I get to remove myself a little bit more and look into advocacy work, look into case management work. But my days are also extremely long, right? It starts as early as 8 a.m. in the morning. Last I got home at 12 midnight, only to jump into a call at 12:30. So yeah, so just really learning to like kind of balance out the day, I guess, and kind of pick and choose what's important in that season.
Was it a Queen of England calling you, or what?
I wish. I mean, it was the UK. It was a call with the Guardian.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Queen of England, you were actually one of only 4 Malaysians
Yeah.
to receive the Queen's Young Leaders Award from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II herself.
Yeah.
And we saw a picture of you on your social media
Yeah.
wearing this red kabaya, receiving the award from
Yeah.
her. I mean, how much of an encouragement are these awards for you, for the work that you do?
Yeah. So I always tell people that it serves as, I mean, it doesn't define the work that we do, and I think I have had to make it extra clear for myself, I guess, you know, as more of these awards or more of these interviews come forward, right? I cannot allow it to define me or limit me to just the Queen's Young Leaders Award winner. But it has been such an encouragement to provide a booster platform to ask ourselves how much more we can do. Because to be honest, I mean, I'm all of 26, but a lot of times I still feel like that kid running Refuge to Refugees, right? So as we win awards and as we grow in our work and grow in influence, it's always very surreal that like, hey, we're actually not too bad.
Yeah.
We're actually pretty okay. Because a lot of times people see us, or people see me as, you know, that person that knows it all, right? You know, like, you know, we win awards and we come out in magazines and we come out in newspapers all the time. People ask for our thoughts, you know, on global and national platforms. And people think that we've gotten it all together. But truth to be told, we're still figuring it out along the way, and taking a day as it comes, you know, kind of always putting ourselves back and asking ourselves, you know, what is my conviction? What is my conviction? Understanding that my convictions has to be stronger than my emotions.
Yeah. And I believe all these awards, all these interviews are a good platform for you to bring awareness to the plight of these refugees as well, right?
Yeah.
How are you? I mean, like, you say it's a day-to-day figuring out work in progress kind of thing.
Yeah.
do you base your work on anybody else's work around the region, or is it like we'll figure it out along the way how we do it, or
Yeah.
do you communicate with other people who are doing the same kind of work that you're doing?
I
in
guess
other
do you have a
countries?
mentor
Yeah.
Yeah.
in a sense?
So one of my mentors would be Dr. Hartini Zainuddin. So she's a child rights activist. She started Yayasan Chowkit. She's a legend.
Oh yeah.
She's been in the field for the past 40 years. And what was really significant was when I was just starting out at 17, I wanted a mentor in the field, and I basically just researched a bunch of random people, sent them emails, and Dr. Tini was the only one that replied. She replied and she goes like, let's meet in Bangsa for coffee. And with fear and trembling and just like all this bunch of nerves, I met her in Bangsa for coffee. And the fact that like Dr. Tini actually, she walked me through the entire process, and she's ever since, it's been 8-9 years, right? And she's still that person that I work with on my most complex cases. So every time I get stuck, I just go like, hey, Dr. Tini, like this is what I'm stuck with, this is what I'm doing. And that's how we get to work together. So I think it makes a huge difference for me having a mentor in the field.
Because you know what's right and what's wrong to do in a way, right?
Yeah.
Now, besides the multiple awards, of course, and being able to bring awareness to the plight of the refugees here in Malaysia, what are some of the most rewarding things about doing what you do?
Yeah. I think it is seeing the kids grow and come a full cycle. So one of the students that I was first teaching in, like, that I taught in my first batch of students, she got resettled to the US a couple of years ago. She graduated then as a valedictorian of her school.
Wow.
And then she got a full scholarship to Georgia Tech University, one of the top universities for research. And that's what she's doing. She got a full scholarship. And when I think back, she was a student that couldn't read and write when she first met us. She couldn't speak a word of English. I had to learn a lot of the Burmese Chin language to actually even communicate with these communities, right? And then this other student, her name is Angela. She was also in the first batch of students that I was teaching, and she came. I remember I met her right after she arrived from Myanmar, so she's still really timid, really shy. We've really then built a relationship over the years, and today she is a case worker in a domestic violence shelter. And I get to bring her for policy meetings. So we're going for a big policy meeting tomorrow. And when I look at our kids now and just being able to do things like that with them, right? To kind of bring them to meetings and get them a voice at the table, that is what keeps me going, I guess. That's one of my biggest wins, knowing that like it's hard to see results overnight. But after 8 years and kind of being able to be colleagues with the kids that you've worked with, that is extremely rewarding. And that really brings me joy.
Because you've molded these young people, and then now they're paying it forward as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So nice. Now, I know you started this at 17, 18, but did you manage to further your own studies, or you just committed yourself full-time to this?
Yeah, so I did my foundation in business and my degree in accounting and finance. So for a good 4 years, I was running the NGO and going to school myself. It was a tough juggle, but we made it.
Planning to go even further, studies-wise?
Probably in, an area of human rights or refugee
I was thinking about
work.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But just the 8 years alone, have you had any regrets? The things that you could have done better, or?
I think, not so much. I think it was, if I could tell something to my younger self, it would be you didn't need to be so hard on yourself. I think I spent so many of my 18, 19-year-olds just really struggling to be an adult and trying to like put up the perfect front, right? Like run an organization and go to school and achieve all these things in life. And I think it was only like when I was 25 and 26 where I started figuring out like, hey, I can actually be my age, it was really where I started figuring myself out. On a more personal level, when I remove work and everything else.
Why should people support charitable causes? I think more importantly, like why? Some people don't know why they should start to do charity.
It is because I feel that it's because we all I think when you pay it forward and when you give back to society, it's actually it's an extremely humbling and fulfilling process. I would say that a big part of me discovering myself, and this is a common narrative. A whole big bunch of my friends are fellows with Teach for Malaysia, and we have all these hard conversations, right? Why do we do what we do? I think it is because it provides you a platform to discover yourself and discover your why. I feel that it's always so important. I mean, I always joke with people and tell them that, when I have kids in the future, I would probably send them to refugee school and sit them down in school with me and learn alongside these kids, because we live in such a complex society, and in a way our own little bubbles that's all that we know of, right? But I think it's so important to actually integrate with people who are different than us. It forges a better understanding and more empathy, I guess.
How can they start though? Sometimes people are like, oh, I want to do more for this community, for the orphans, for the older folks, or for the less fortunate, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah, so I always tell people start by learning about the cause and the plight, and start by having a conversation. I think that we don't need to start big, right? And I always tell people that you don't need to run an NGO, but you
you did.
Yeah,
you started out running an NGO.
Yeah, you don't need to run an NGO. You don't need to run a massive project. But what you can do is start being kind to the guards in your neighborhood, and start fighting for a cause in a really small way. I'm only saying this because when we aim big, we often get overwhelmed and we don't know where to start, right? But it always starts from a conversation. Get to know someone, get to know the plight, of a refugee, of a migrant worker, of a single mom. And that allows us then more space to go okay, what do we know and how can we help moving forward?
And a lot of times people help by just donating money. That's all they know how to do to help.
And I think, well, that's great. I also feel that, so often people feel like that I need money to be able to donate, right? Or I need time to be able to volunteer. I have started challenging people and going hey, maybe it's not money or time. Maybe it's about being a voice, using our social media platforms, using our networks, using our circle of friends, and go hey, do you know, we're all at least in a field in different ways, right? Some of us are brilliant communicators, some of us are great storytellers, some of us have money and time. So how, if we can't donate money and we can't spend time, how can we tell stories of the community? How can we dignify and amplify their voices so that more are aware of what's happening on the ground, I guess?
Finally, Heidi, what's your next challenge that you like to overcome in the next few years?
Yeah, work-wise?
Anything.
Just
Yeah.
any challenges that you like to overcome.
I think I would really like to learn to be even stronger and bolder in my convictions, and advocate for issues in a more courageous way. I know there's this that is partially of what I'm doing right now, but I often still find myself, it's a decision that we have to make every minute. I wish that I wish there's a decision that we can make, just a once-off, I want to be an advocate for refugees forever. But it's hard. It's so hard fighting, and coming under fire. The past couple of weeks, I've really experienced personal attacks, from serving the community, from working with the community. It's things that we've experienced, since we started working with the communities, but just further amplified over the past 4 weeks, where we get really nasty comments. People actually come into our inboxes and say really terrible things. This guy even went go hang yourself.
Oh my goodness.
And that I remember that broke me, right? Because I was just wondering, how can people just disagree in such a way? So I think, if there's one thing that I want to work towards, it's to further amplify the voices of the community that I serve with, and fight for a seat at a table, as we start getting access to big table discussions, policy meetings, to make sure that every time I move forward, I bring the community alongside with me.